Hello, everyone. Welcome to session number 15 of FileMaker Group Therapy for Citizen Developers. My name is Tim Jones. Our topic for this session is data-driven navigation. On the agenda for today, I'm going to show you my approach to creating a data-driven navigation scheme, where we'll use a table of data to control the labels and destinations of buttons on a button bar, which gives users a consistent navigation bar on every layout, such that if we edit the records in the table, the button labels and destinations will change across all layouts. This gives us another weapon in the struggle to find ways to update elements that appear on multiple layouts in our FileMaker database solutions. Here's the recipe that we're going to follow. First, we'll build a table called nav for navigation, and we'll enter a record into that table for each navigation bar button that we would like to present to our users. Secondly, we'll connect the nav table to every anchored table occurrence on the graph, on the relationship graph. And then thirdly, we'll add a button bar to a layout that uses formulas for its labels and destination layouts. And that formula we'll take a close look at here in a moment. It will point to the records in that nav table. And lastly, we'll copy that button bar onto every layout. Now, it's the formula that's really kind of the magic of this whole bit. The formula that we're going to use is going to use a wonderful little function called GetNthRecord. The GetNthRecord function retrieves the value of the specified field from the specified or nth record in a record set. The syntax looks like this. The name of the function, GetNthRecord. The first argument asks, what field would you like me to go and bring back the value from? And of course, that field name will most likely be prefixed with the name of a table if the field isn't in the current table. And then secondly, from what record number do you want me to fetch the value? So it's a very different function than most functions that FileMaker gives us to retrieve data from some place. Here's an example. Let's say we have a navigation table filled with these 6 records. Okay. If we were to run the GetNthRecord function and say, oh, go and bring back the value in this label field, the label field, from record number 3, it would result in visits, the value in the label field for the 3rd record. Likewise, if we said, go and grab the value out of the table field from record number 6, it would bring back material. And then we can use those bits of information in our script that will go to a particular layout, because we've named our layouts in such a way that they use those table names in the layout name itself. All right, so here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to jump over into FileMaker. We're continuing to use our animal care database that we've been building all along throughout these sessions. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a new table. File Manage Database. In the Tables tab, we have 17 tables defined already. A few of them I've prefixed with the letter Z because I want them to sync to the bottom because they're not user-facing tables. And I'm going to do the same thing with this Z nav table. This table is really only going to be used by us as the developer to maintain the navigation bar that we'll put onto each layout. I'll create that table. Here in these later versions of FileMaker, it creates 5 fields automatically for us in that table. I don't need any of those 5 fields, so I'm going to delete them all. In this table, we're simply going to have an ID field that will store an auto enter serialized number. So I'll make it a number field. And then in options, we'll say, please give each record that we create here the next higher serial number, starting with 1, incrementing by 1s. Don't let anybody change those IDs to keep them sacred, keep them safe. And validation, in case we import records into this table, we'd want to make sure that they were always numbers coming in, that the field were never left empty, and always contained a unique value. No duplicate IDs, of course. Next, we're going to have a field called order. And the order field will be the way that we're going to be able to control the sort of the buttons in our navigation bar. In fact, maybe I'll call it sort instead of order to try to make that a little more clear, or sort order. And it's going to be also a number field where we'll be able to kind of numerically chronicle which button we want to show first on our button bar, then which one will be to the right of that, button number 2, which one will be to the right of that, button number 3, and so on. We're going to have a field in this nav table for storing the label that we want shown on the button for each navigation button. Of course, that will be text. And then we're going to have a field called destination where we get to decide where the user will be taken if they do indeed click that button. Right? If they click the animal button, we'd want them to go to the animal list layout most likely. And so it's in this destination field where we'll be able to specify the name of the table that we want them taken to if they click a particular button. And then to give ourselves a little more flexibility, we'll also have a view field that we can use to say, well, if they click such and such a button, maybe the animals button on the button bar, maybe we want to take them into a layout for that animal table that's in the form view, or maybe we want to take them instead to a layout that's for that animal table but in the list view. And we'll be able to control the view that they're taken to, or really the layout that they're taken to, because we'll have a form view layout and a list view layout for every major user-facing table. And in this field, we'll be able to decide which view we want them taken to if they click that corresponding button. So I'll create that. And those are the fields that we need in this new nav table. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take a minute and just set up the layout that was given to us when we built that table. In layout mode, I'll say we don't want that layout to show on this navigation bar or on this layout pop-up menu. So we'll go into layout setup here by clicking the pencil. We'll say, make this a hidden layout. Don't show it in the typical layout menus. Let's apply to it the standard FileMaker menus, because at this point, from our session 2 times ago, when we built custom menus, it would use the animal care menu set menus because I declared that as the file default. And we'll say okay there. Also, let's make sure that it's in list view. Good. And no form view available. We'll make list view the default view. Okay. I'm going to do some quick redesign work on this layout. We'll say, let's bring over these fields in this order. You can use the fields panel to rearrange the fields into the order that you want them to come out in. And then you can say, all right, I want to bring them out in a horizontal row with the labels up top. Sort label destination view. Yep, that'll be perfect. We don't need to see the ID numbers. They just need to be there for the sake of the relationship. And we'll drop them right there. So the labels appeared up in this top navigation part, which I'm going to retool to be a header part instead. And the fields appeared in the body. That's fine. Body doesn't need to be very tall anymore because I'm trying to make this into a list style layout. That looks good. And then we'll just improve the look of those guys a little bit. Maybe with, no, that's fine. Okay, so we've got a layout looking good. Okay. Now we're going to start to add some records into it. Make a new record. Let's say that this is going to be the back button and we want it to appear first. So we'll give it the sort order value of number 1. It'll have a label of back. The destination, there is no table called back, but we'll just use this kind of as a keyword, and we'll make sure that our script eventually checks to see, hey, was the destination back? And if it was, then take them back to the previous layout they were in. More on that in the next session 2 weeks from now. We're going to have a home button, so we can send them to whatever home layout we want. We'll have a button to let them go and look at the animals list, and that's going to be that'll take them to the animal table. And let's have them go to the list view. Likewise, the home view doesn't really have a, or the home, there isn't really a table for home, but notice that we did call our home layout home menu desktop. So for the view portion of my layout names is the second part of the phrase. So for this home button, I'm going to put the word menu. Then our script will be programmed to take the user to the layout whose name starts with whatever is in this field, and then is followed by whatever's in this field, and then is followed by whatever device they are on. So home menu desktop, or home menu iPad, or animal form iPad, right? And so that's where these two pieces, the destination and the view, are going to come into play. And again, you'll see more of that as we go along. We've got customers in this database. And let's say we want to take them to the list view for customers. And the fifth button is going to be for visits. And that table is called the visit table. We'll send them to list view there. And just widen this out a little bit so we're not bouncing back and forth. We have veterinarians, and that table is called the vet table. There are orders for new materials. That we store that data in the order table. Materials. Of course, that's the material table. Vendors. And that we called our vendor table. And in most cases, I'm wanting to send the users to a list view of the records in each of these tables so that then they can kind of drill through the list or search it and find the one record they're interested in. That's a pretty common design pattern called a master detail design pattern. Services that we offer, and we called that table service, whoops. And one more, the different genus of animals that we treat, kind of as a lookup table. There we go. All right, so we've got these 12 records in our nav table. And now the task is going to be to try to use them as the driving source material behind buttons on a button bar. Now, in order to do that, let me pop open another window here. In order to do that, for example, from this layout, we have a button bar, but it's what I would call just a dumb button bar because there's nothing dynamic about these buttons. Each one of them has a manually applied label. As I go into layout mode, you can see that double clicking on a segment of the button bar, that label, home, is just something that we typed manually. Or likewise, the animals button on this button bar just is labeled animals. And the script that it's going to run, the go to layout script, we're sending it static labels like animal and list. What we're going to do is we're going to change the label and the script parameters to be driven by that nav table that we just set up. Okay. In order to do that, though, in order to refer to records in the nav table, they have to be related. There has to be a relationship from the table that the layout is based on to the table where those navigation records are. And so I'm going to go and set that up now. On the relationship graph, we're going to do something that I have told you never to do. This does violate the anchor buoy method, but in my opinion, the benefit that we get is worth the cost. Okay, let me just select all of those elements on the relationship graph and shift them over a little bit, give myself some room on the left. Remember, in the anchor buoy method of navigation or of graph management, all the table occurrences down the left-hand side, the ones that would start with capital letters, are anchors, and then you string buoys off of them whenever you need to access related data from that table occurrence. And we always base our layouts on these anchor table occurrences here. So if I want the household layout to be able to, or any household layout to be able to see those navigation records, I've got to string a relationship between those two. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Even though we lose a little bit of the beauty of the anchor buoy strategy, because now once each of these is connected to a common table, they'll all be virtually connected through it to each other. Okay, but again, I think the cost is worth the benefit. Now, you notice that I dragged from the ID field, primary key, to the ID field, primary key. Also something I've told you never to do, but that's because I'm going to change the nature of this relationship. Double clicking on the relationship line, we're going to change this relationship to not be based on equal values in those two fields or matching values, but rather to be what's called a cross product join or a Cartesian join, where every record in this table is considered related to every record in this table. So it really has no bearing whatsoever on what fields you choose to base the relationship on. A cross product join is a rarely used join type or relationship operator, but it's very handy in situations like this, where from any household record, we'd like to be able to see every nav record. Those nav records, we'd like them to be sorted in the order that we're going to specify using that order field. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 12. And so I'm going to come over here and bake into the relationship. I'm going to bake into it a sort. Turning on the sort records checkbox, we're going to say, you know what, sort the nav records by the values in that sort order field in an ascending fashion, small to big. Okay, there, we've got that relationship just the way we want. Now I have to do the same thing for all of the other, at least user-facing table occurrences. I have to tie them all to the nav table, sorting by sort order. I'm going to use the primary key fields in each case just to keep it clean and consistent. Move this down a little bit into the neighborhood in which I'm working. And we'll change that to a cross product join, sorting by the sort order field. Continue to move this down a little bit more. Got some more to do here. Thank you for your patience. I know this is a little bit boring, but there wasn't too many ways I could speed it up. I'm going to skip over this non-user facing table here of treatment line. That's more of just a join table for line item records that correspond to a treatment. Same thing with order line. Another join table that we don't base layouts on order line most likely, or if we do, they're reports where we wouldn't need a user-facing layout with a toolbar at least. And then I do need utility because that's what the home layout is based on. And we can see that right here, even though it's kind of a utilitarian layout. So I'll use the primary key field that's in there because again, it doesn't matter with a cross-product join what's in the fields that we use for that relationship. Okay, I don't think I missed any. I'm looking in the chat because you all hopefully would have chimed in and said, oh, you blew it on that one. I think I got them. We'll zoom out a bit and let's see, whoops. Okay. Yep, doesn't look like I missed any. We'll put that nav table back kind of in the middle of the ballpark there and get back to 100% zoom. Okay, good. We'll say okay there. So now, every user-facing layout has a relationship to the nav table. So now I'm going to first show you how to create a button bar, because I think I did this outside of any of our sessions. You have a typical button tool right here that you can use to put buttons on layouts, but the buttons that you put on layouts like that with the button tool, you can't name them with a formula, right? You can't give them a name that's customized based on some piece of data. You can only type static text here. So that's not going to meet the need. I'll delete that. A button bar, on the other hand, this tool right here allows you to create a button bar that's full of multiple segments. They start with 3 initially, and then you can add more with this plus sign button. And you can make them go horizontal or vertical, and you can have them have labels and or icons, labels, icons, or both, labels and icons in any configuration. Okay, and as you make the button bar itself bigger or smaller, the segments within it get bigger or smaller. So they make for a very flexible way to present a series of buttons that you want to share a similar look and to share equal size. You cannot go in and individually size the segments of a button bar. They are all at a equal size based on the overall size of the whole button bar itself. This up here is a button bar that I already added, so I'll double click on it. And that opens up button bar setup and takes me to the segment that I double clicked on. Instead of using the word back hard coded here, I'm going to click the pencil icon here and write a formula in place of that static word back. We'll get rid of that. And from Z utility, I'm going to point to Z nav. There's a relationship there. We just created it on the graph. Okay. And I'm going to use a function called GetNthRecord. The GetNthRecord function, as I described earlier, asks us for 2 arguments. First is, hey, what field are you trying to get me to bring back some piece of information from, or to bring back its value? And in this case, I want to bring back the label value. That is the value that we put in the label field or label column of the first record in that table. Now remember, I built into the relationship a sort order that sorts the nav records by the sort order value. So that means we'll be able to change the order anytime by just changing those sort order numbers. But this is the first button on the toolbar. Therefore, it should bring back whichever button label is in record number 1, sorted record number 1 of the nav table. Okay, I'm going to highlight that because we'll want to copy and paste it a bunch of times. And I'll worry about the scripts later. Let's move on to the next segment, and we'll replace that static value with our formula, but change this 1 to a 2 because this is the second button. So we'd want it to get its label from the second record in the nav table. And likewise on down the line. Third button pulls from the third record in the nav table. Fourth button pulls from the fourth record of the nav table. Now let me push this over to the other side because you can see we're running into our kind of our limit here. But I'll show you how we get around that limit. Fifth button is going to pull from the fifth record of the nav table. Sixth button, currently vets, we'll have it pull from the sixth record. But what if you have, 8 or 9 or 10 places that you want the user to be able to get to, destinations, targets that you want your button bar to be able to send the user to, or your navigation bar? Well, what I do is I typically put a more button on there, and that more button in the button bar is a popover button. Okay, the 7th segment in this 8-segment button bar is a popover button, whereas the others were regular buttons. We can see that right here, right? Segment number 6 is a regular button, 1 through 6 regular buttons. 7 is a popover button, and so it presents a popover panel. Likewise, number 8, our actions button is a popover button. It presents a panel. Watch as I double click on the more button, its panel opens up. This right there is a popover panel. And inside it then, I put another button bar. This button bar, I added 6 segments to it, but let's say that, well, we think there's got to be some room for growth. So I'm going to increase the height of the popover button, then increase the height of this nested button bar. So again, this is just another one of these. It's another button bar, but it's oriented vertically instead of horizontally. And I'll stretch it to take advantage of the extra space that I just added by increasing the height of the popover button that it's sitting inside of. And then I'll double click on the first segment of it, which opens up its button bar setup dialog box. And I'll keep going. So instead of the static word orders, I'll paste in the GetNthRecord function, and we'll make that grab its value, its label, I should say, from the 7th record. Likewise, 8th record, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and then look how easy it is when we decide, yeah, we really need some more room. Let's add some more room for commands here on our expansion, if you will, our expansion menu. I'll just hit the plus sign a bunch of times. Maybe we'll add 4 more segments. There we go. I won't fill them with calculations yet. I won't give them anything to do yet, because if I put calculations in there, at least that calculation that I've been using, they would display a question mark saying, hey, there is no 13th, 14th, 15th, or 16th record in the nav table. So I don't have anything to bring back. So it brings back a question mark as a result, which is a little bit clumsy, obviously. Okay, at that point, I'm going to exit out of the layout and save the changes just so that you can see if it's working. Look at that. The labels are the results of calculations, right? Even the more menu has the results of those calculations pulling from the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th records from this nav table. And of course, if I change the names of one of these, let's say we change vets to doctors, like so, you can see how it just changed. Boom, right? Amazing. I love this. And so you've got total control over the wording on your buttons, and of course, eventually, we haven't done this part yet, but we will, the destination or the functionality of each button, like what it's going to do, where it's going to take the user. So let's go back and work on that part next. We'll get back into layout mode. And let's get back to our first segment. Okay, in button bar setup. The first segment's not a good example. Let's go to the second segment. There we go. That's a better example. This used to be the home button, and it's programmed to run the script called go to layout that has 2 script parameters expected to come in: the name of the table that we want them to be taken to, and the name of the view of that table, if it's a menu or list view or form view, or if it's a report or something like that. Well, so the script parameter down here is forming a list using the wonderful list function, forming a list out of these two static values. We don't want to use static values anymore. We want to grab the value out of the table field and the view field, or I should say destination, I think I called it, and view field from the corresponding record in the nav table. Let's replace home with another reference to GetNthRecord. We use the GetNthRecord function and say, hey, you grab the value out of the destination field in record number 2, okay? And you grab the value out of the view field of record number 2. There. So we're still just concocting a list that the script expects to get in, but now the contents of that list are dynamic, pulling their values from the appropriate fields over there in the nav table. I'm going to highlight that and copy it so that, of course, we can paste it into the other locations. I'll go back to the segment 1 and we'll retrofit that one to say, hey, we don't want you to run that script anymore. We want you to run this script. And for the script parameter, paste, and we'll change those 2s to 1s. There's the other 2, change that to a 1, like so. All right, that one's looking good. We'll move on to our third segment. And again, continue to replace the old static approach with this dynamic approach of grabbing values out of the nav records. Okay, next segment, script parameter, highlight that all and paste, change the 2 in this case to a 4, and likewise a 4 there. Next segment, script parameter, select all with Command A, Command V to paste. I think we're on number 5 at this point. 5, and okay. Next segment, script parameter. All right, and just give me a second to finish these up. Okay, that covered the last one in that button bar. Now we'll expand the more popover button and work with this secondary button bar. Again, double clicking on one of its segments and doing the same thing. So now we're at button number 7, row number 7 of our nav table then. Should be the one that supplies the destination and view name for this button. Number 8. Oops, too far. There. 9. All right, 3 more. Again, thank you for your patience. This is 10. Right, let's see, I'm just checking, make sure I'm, yep, good, okay, 10, and then 11. And 12. Okay, fantastic. I think I have all of them set to change the cursor into a hand. I like that effect. Lets people know that they're over top of something that's clickable. And so we'll exit and save the layout. And there is a script already written that go to layout script. I'll just show you that it's so simple. 5 statements, really. Right, 5 lines of code here. First, grab the information that came in as a script parameter those are those two values, the table name and the view name that we just passed in. Grab them, store them in a variable called param list, then parse that param list up and say, okay, go and get the first value out of that param list and store it in a variable called table. And then likewise, go and get the second value out of that parameter list and store it in a value called, or in a variable called view. And then go to the layout whose name is produced by concatenating, I like that word, sticking together, gluing together this string of text strings. Whatever's in the table variable, and then an underscore, and then whatever's in the view variable, and then an underscore, and then whatever is in the global variable called $device that we define back over here in our detect device script that runs a function that we wrote in one of our earlier sessions. That simply contains the word desktop or iPad or iPhone, depending on what kind of device the user is using to connect to this database. And then lastly, I like it when the window resizes to fit just nicely around the content of the layout. So that's what this last script step is doing. All right, let's see if they work. If I click the visits button, we should end up at the visit underscore list underscore desktop layout, because it knows that I'm on a desktop computer, right? There's a variable in memory right now called $device that has desktop. That variable was set by that script that I just showed you, the detect device script step. And so being on a desktop device, it's going to take me to the desktop versions of the layouts. So the functionality is working at a basic level. Then, of course, I'll just go through and take this newly improved button bar and copy it onto all the other layouts. Don't worry, I did this part in advance so that you wouldn't have to wait for me to do it, but I'll just do it a couple times manually so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll need to get rid of the old button bar, of course, delete, and then paste, and then make sure that it's shoved right up into the upper left-hand corner where the other ones were. So the button bars will be in exactly the same position from one layout to the next. That way it looks like a constant element there that's part of your application interface. Oh, the other thing I wanted to do, was I wanted to change the icons here so that we don't get any particular icons, because if I change the order of the labels, the order of the navigation buttons, the icon may not correspond anymore. So let's just go back to the button bar and say no labels. Let's just use text only on our button bar. Okay, that's going to be a better one to copy. I'll grab that, copy it, come over here to the next layout, get rid of that one that's got all the old, and paste. And sometimes it doesn't paste right up into the upper left-hand corner, so you have to move it manually. All right, those two, let's see, that's animal list desktop and home. So should be able to go home and animals back and forth. Those are both being done dynamically. I'll prove it by turning on the script debugger and say, okay, when I click animals, it's going to run the script, go to layout table. I'll jump into that script and I'll show the data viewer as well. There we go. First, set a variable called param list that gets whatever was being passed in. There it is. It's got animal on one line, list on the next. Those values, of course, being pulled from the nav record that was in the third nav record, right? And that button then passed those into this script. Then the next step starts parsing up that parameter list into its individual elements, putting animal into a variable called table, putting view into or putting list into a variable called view, and then finally the go to layout statement says go to the layout whose name is the result of this calculation, and there we go. And then adjust the window to fit nicely in that layout. Okay, let me show you a finished version where all the layouts have that file or have that button bar attached to them already. It's already on the layouts. It's this version B here. Okay. And so we can jump around happily, vets and visits and vendors and so forth, customers, back home. It's all working. But more importantly, and the reason we exerted all this effort is that we can control those, we can control the navigation bar in each one of our layouts. Just for fun, let me pop open 3 or 4 windows and go to different layouts in each one. Okay, so we'll go to animals here, and then we'll go to visits here. Okay, and then I'll just move these windows down so that you can see the button bar in each of them. Right there and there. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. There. Okay, so you can see 4 button bars at once. And as I come in here and start playing around with these things, let's say we change vets to veterinarians again, or doctors. Right, as soon as I hit tab to move out, boom, the vets label changed on all of those. Or in the same way, let's say that instead of taking the user to the list view layout for the vet table, we want them to go to the form view layout just so that they can see one vet record at a time. So I'll change the destination, or the view value, I should say, the view value to form instead of list for that doctors button. And so now, as I click the doctors button here, it takes us to the doctor or the vet form desktop layout, not the vet list desktop layout, because of that change right there. So it gives you real control over where the users go if they click the button. Okay, well, look at that. We finished with a few minutes to spare. Are there any questions on what we've looked at here with at least the starting part of building a data-driven navigation scheme?